very interesting to learn about, what venture capitalist funds think about, because normally when you're looking at this entire thing, you're coming from the perspective of founder, as most people are here. And one of important thing that I think Susar mentioned is how he invested in Anand sir $200,000 just like that. And that talks about an important principle that he holds, which is that he is investing in the person as much as he is investing in the business. So, as Warren Buffett has said, you must invest in yourself first. And when you are investing in others, you must look for integrity. So, that is something that we all should keep in mind. That is something that I can take away from this conversation. Moving on to Adarsh and Nachiket, is it possible for us to have a conversation with them right now?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. Okay.
I shall just reiterate what their talk is going to be about. You already know their introduction. Tonight, Adarsh and Nachiket are going to walk us through the Maharashtra GCC Policy 2026, a significant initiative designed to attract and incentivize companies setting up GCCs in the state. If India is the right place to start, as Javier said that India is the future, Adarsh and Nachiket are going to tell us exactly what Maharashtra is doing to make it the right state. Adarsh and Nachiket, over to you.
Okay, before they start, right, like let me set the context. Government of Maharashtra, right, like has created some policy, and generally, right, like when we build our companies, I mean personally, right, like I'm not very much, I'm not aware of, right, like what happens in the government side, and I cannot afford, right, like PwC team as well to tell us, right, like what basically is required. So I'm very happy, right, like when I mentioned Nachiket, that Nachiket, please come and tell us, right, like what basically government is offering, so that we all would know. Because of course, right, like we need that information, right, like with everyone. So Nachiket agreed, and others, thank you so much, right, like for coming here. So please, right, like try to ask as many questions as you can. But this could be a good information where you would understand what government of Maharashtra is taking steps, right, like to help companies like us.
Thanks, Anand, for that. Please pardon me for voice, a little under the weather. So I know while we are talking about Maharashtra, since this is a global platform, let me start with global first. If you can just run the slideshow on full screen mode. So just taken out some facts from the public domain. And this is what the government does every quarter. They keep updating the FDI into India, foreign investments into India, from where they flow. And if you look at, this is for the quarter ended March 26, and a large chunk of it has come from Singapore, 25%, and Mauritius, 24%. Then we have US, Netherlands, Japan, and then the other countries follow. So if you just have a quick look at this, the typical Euro regions, because UK is now out of the Euro, not much of it comes from Europe. I just thought I'd just lay down this before we get into the GCC part of it. Just on the next slide. And if you look at where the investment is actually coming in into India, it is largely the services sector and the IT/ITES sector, which is number 1 and 2, and that accounts to about 32%. So roughly 50% of the FDI comes in from Singapore and Mauritius, and about 32% goes in these two major sectors. And then the manufacturing ones are below, as you can see, in terms of percentage. And this is just the data which is updated every quarter. And there's one more. And when we drill down state-wise, of course, Maharashtra is the topmost, 31%, and then is Karnataka. So again, if you just add the first two, we are again at 50%. So what we are just trying to see is where is the investment coming in and who is kind of benefiting it. Luckily, we are at the receiving end in good terms here, because Maharashtra tops it with 31%. And I think the others are just over there. So let me just briefly touch upon taxability overall.
Yeah. To think, I mean, is there a citywide also? I mean, do we know Pune how much?
At least they haven't published it
Okay.
source-wise.
But in terms
We
of
can get
GCC,
that.
But in terms of GCC, about 15% of the national GCC is in Pune.
Oh, okay. I mean, great. 15%.
15%. Yeah, I think, the recent data is yet to be updated. So we've crossed 2,000 GCCs across India. And of course, Bangalore leads the space. And then you have Hyderabad. And I think third, Pune and Chennai are in the race. Pune is slightly ahead. And 15% is what the last published data is. I think we will be more than that.
Yeah.
So I just cover taxability very high level, and since we will get down to Maharashtra GCC, I'll then hand it over to others. Just laying down the base tax rates for a company which are 30%. That's the standard rate, and then other entities get into a 22% rate, which is effectively 25.17. Almost 90 to 95% of the companies have actually transitioned to 25.17. There are certain old companies, because of various reasons, continue in the 30% regime. But largely, this is what it seems. Seems simpler, right? 25% rate for companies, and then you attain, right? So I'll just share one because we have large founders and creators here. My first experience with a founder was almost 12 years back when we were discussing. And he said that he's done this company for 5 years and he's going to sell it and there will be a non-compete. So that's how we started. And there was, back then, any non-compete was treated as a one-time receipt and not chargeable to tax. So we did the transaction. 2 years later, another company, then third year another, fourth year another. I, just a loose conversation mentioned, you're doing this every year, it is non-taxable, somebody will tax it. And come 2 years down the line, the law was amended, any non-compete fee is taxable. So the law will keep shuffling based on how things progress at tribunals, then high courts and Supreme Courts. And then they say that, look, no, this was not the intent. The intent was always this and we will now tax it. Thanks to the government, one thing which they clarified after Vodafone judgment which came in, they said that largely whatever amendments we do will all be prospective, we will not do a retro amendment. So largely because of the certainty which needs to exist. And there is another bit of certainty that they have brought in for GCCs, which is very important. What typically happens in GCCs is you will have an Indian entity render services to the foreign entity. And most of the IP that is generated will belong to the foreign entity. Though the Indian entities, creators, or those who actually do the patents have their own name, the ultimate thing goes to the foreign company. So they are generally billed under tax, we call them a cost plus entity or a captive entity. Now what the government has done in the last budget, and this is already in force, they have said that if you look at the profitability of the Indian entity, whatever amount it spends is its cost base, add a markup of 15.5%, then we should be good enough. 15.5% on the cost base should be treated as a profit, and that will be subject to tax in India. So that's a certainty that the government is giving. They have started this from financial year 26-27. It's known as safe harbor rules, which were already there earlier, and they were applicable at different rates for different sectors. And there was a cap of 300 crores for companies. If you go beyond that, the safe harbor wouldn't apply. What has now been done is up to 2,000 crores. They have said that even if you are at a 15.5%, we will treat this as good enough. And they have, in fact, included the ambit to include software developers, ITAs, the KPOs, contract R&D, basically large chunk of ITAs, other than the BPOs, are all included here to give them certainty. And this is the first year where it is starting. Of course, it is an unilateral act from India. There are foreign entities who actually do a bilateral APA because the negotiations take place both sides. But this is a unilateral act and it's a welcome act because this will give certainty to large foreign subsidiaries and taxpayers in India. Just in terms of the setups, I think broadly we have 4 categories. I know we had experts here who would have discussed multiple things. Just laying down for just understanding is we have a shared service center, which is the basic part. Then comes the global business services, and then we have GCCs, and then the COE, right, the Center of Excellence. With each kind of a setup increasing, it all depends on what scale of IP is getting created, what scale of markets are we reaching, how many internal stakeholders, how many external stakeholders. So this is what is generally happening in the industry right now across the globe, and this is the broad categorization which exists. And when it comes to any entity in India that is being formed, we are generally looking at three kinds of funding, where the equity is the bare minimum, the first one which comes in, and there are different instruments and ECBs depending on the mix that is there. I have just taken a short one, just a very high level of where we stand in terms of each of these modes of funding coming in. If you look at equity, typically that is for the kind of capex that one entity does in a GCC kind of a model, where the money is pumped in, you will have your furniture fitting, set out, leasehold improvements done, and then you run on a cost plus. So typically to get back equity, it's not easy. So once the entity starts making profits, by default under tax, GCCs are supposedly profit making because of the 15.5% I just explained. And by default, once it is profit making, you pay out dividends to shareholders, which are taxed again on different rates compared to different countries. Like Singapore, for example, has 10% or 15% depending on the holding. Mauritius, which was second one, has a 5% rate today. And US again is 15%, 25%. It again depends on the shareholding. Each treaty has its own percentage that they tax dividends. And capital gains is for the shareholder or the owner of the entity, where long-term gains is now at a 12.5% plus the surcharge and cess, and the short-term gain is as high as 35% for foreign investors. And preference shares is again something where you have multiple parties coming in and assured kind of a dividend once it is profit making. So taxability is pretty much similar. Then debentures is again a written loan between the parties. There, the return that you get is irrespective of profits. That is again generally taxed at 10% in most treaties because the domestic rates, as usual, are high, 20% in all cases. And external loans again depends if you're borrowing directly from a bank or a bank in India. There is interest which is going to be taxable for the recipient, and again depends on treaty to treaty, the rates will vary. I thought I'll just start with an overview of taxes since we thought we'll be here, and then we'll move on to the Maharashtra GCC policy. Any questions you can just put it on the group. I'll try to address as much as I can.
So can you just elaborate those 4 types, so that we'll know, right, like in which type we get, 4 types.
Yeah. So typically, there are multiple factors that one considers, right? What is the type of employees that you're hiring? How skilled they are? What is the kind of interactions that they will have with internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders? If you look at GCCs, generally they will have limited discussions with external stakeholders. It is largely internal. Whereas the COE, you will have largely internal as well as external both. And internally, GCCs and COEs are seen as revenue centers because they will help develop ideas. You could also operate on a build, operate, transfer kind of a model in all of these. But it's the idea creation that one actually does in India, which helps discuss with the overseas entity. And that is where, because shared service center is a very basic one, your accounts receivable, payable start getting processed, HR functions come in over here. So each of them has different limbs that one can go through. This is just a broad categorization, but each one of them can decide on their own. Over to you, Adarsh.
Thank you, Ruchika. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So tax is always a very uncomfortable topic for founders and promoters. So I have come to a more palatable topic: incentives. So in one hand, government takes away tax from you, but incentives is something that they are offering, literally cash incentives for setting up in the state, right? So while we go to this topic of incentives, GCC, a couple of years back, the government of India recognized that GCC can be a very important contributor to India's success. And then they came out with a national framework for GCCs. Since then, in the last 2 years, almost every state in India has come up with an incentive policy for GCCs, right? If you look at the last 2-3 years, Bangalore and Hyderabad have been taking the lion's share of this new GCC setups in India. This policy is an attempt to make Maharashtra an attractive destination, right? And while I've looked at all the state policies, I am proud to say Maharashtra policy is one of the most aggressive ones. It is giving you significant incentives, and I'll take you through who is eligible and what incentives you are getting, right? Now, first of all, who is eligible? It covers both greenfield, as in new setups, as well as existing setups which are expanding, right? So it's not just for greenfield; it is for both greenfield as well as brownfield. Now, here the definition of GCC is pretty simple. You don't have to think about the 4 tiers. Any company which is giving services to its group, right? Any kind of support services, that is covered. It can be R&D, information technology, finance, center of excellence, everything is covered. What is not covered is BPOs, call centers, and pure play sales entities. If they are only doing sales in India or voice related support, then it is not covered. Right? So the focus is to have a little higher level of in the value chain, a higher level of GCC. Can just go to the next slide. Right. So for new entities, all new entities are covered by default. But for existing entities, they have to cross a first threshold. They have to increase their headcount by minimum 25%, as well as their capex by 25%. So both conditions they have to fulfill: 25% in capex as well as 25% in headcount. Then you get qualified for the policy. Now, for both new and existing, you have to have a minimum 100 employees or a minimum 50 crore of investment. This is a or condition, not an and condition. Right? For new entities, if you are hiring more than 100 people, you get qualified. For existing, you have to have 3 conditions: 25% of increase from the existing manpower, 25% increase in the capex, as well as 100 employees. Once you cross this threshold, you get qualified into you get categorized into the 4 or 5 buckets. So as you can see, if this screen is visible for everyone, up to 250 you are considered as small. From 250 to 500 it is medium, 500 to 700 large, 750 above it's mega, and then ultra mega. Now why this mega and ultra mega classification is important? Throughout the policy, incentives for all the buckets are fixed. But once you cross the mega threshold, the government is willing to sit down and negotiate with you. Okay? So if there is some aspect of the incentive which you are not likely to avail, then you can get a higher incentive somewhere else. If you feel the overall capping is less, you can get it increased. So they are willing to sit down and customize the package especially for you. You have to cross the 750 employee threshold, right? Now this is on the categorization. Now the incentive will depend on where you are situated in Maharashtra. So tier 1 cities, Pune and Mumbai are zone 1. Everything rest of Maharashtra is zone 2. Incentives are higher if you are setting up in zone 2. Right? And the policy has identified priority sectors. While as on today, if I have to tell you, all sectors are welcome. But this is but the priorities will be given to GCCs which are catering to these parent organizations. So the sector of the parent organization is important. And while I was mentioning about the employment criteria, this employment criteria has to be fulfilled within 2 years. So you can decide. So this policy is valid for 5 years. Within this 5-year period, whenever you think of expansion, you have to fulfill that employment condition in 2 years. You can choose which 2 years are included. Just go to the next slide. So before I tell you what the incentives are, a couple of key conditions that you have to remember. Okay. First, what is covered when I say capex? What gets covered in the capex? So you can have building, IT machinery, software. You can have everything related to operations, but other than land. In case of a GCC, more expenditure is done in leasehold improvements and all. That also is covered. If you have laptops on finance lease, those things are also covered. So a large chunk of your investment gets covered, and you get a direct incentive on this capex that you are investing. Okay, this is a first come first serve basis policy. For first time, Maharashtra has not decided a budgetary outlay for this scheme. Okay, so as of now, they are accepting everyone. They have a goal of having 400 new GCCs in Maharashtra. So as they see the response from the industry, then they will decide a capping and they will probably cap this up. So it's important that if you are planning something, you should be first in the race, right? And all the incentive, there are various buckets under this policy where you get incentives, but the total amount of incentives is capped to the investment that you are making. So you will not be incentivized more than the amount that you are putting in. Okay. And lastly, there is a local employment condition. So in Maharashtra, if you are availing an incentive, you have to ensure that you are hiring people from Maharashtra, domiciled in Maharashtra. Okay. So the requirement is that 50% or more people in the supervisory category or 80% in totality should be from domiciled in Maharashtra. Now, for many GCCs, this becomes a problem. I myself have dealt with a GCC. Only because of this condition, they were not able to track where they will hire from, and that is why they could not take the incentive. So this is something which is being done to promote employment in the state, and that's why this condition is there. Now coming to the incentive part, the exciting part, the biggest bucket of incentives is here. First, you can avail either capex subsidy or a rental subsidy. You cannot avail both. It's a or. Okay. You will be eligible to claim 20% of the capex as capex subsidy. So whatever amount you are putting in as capex, 20% of that will be given. There is category wise there is a limit. So small unit can avail only up to 10 crores, medium unit 20 crores, large unit 50 crores. So according to your categorization, there is a limit. The second incentive, the rental assistance, this is available only for greenfield setups. This is not available for brownfield. Okay. If you are setting up in zone 1, let's say Pune, you are allowed 20% of the actual rent you have paid in the year, up to 1 crore for this year, if you are a small unit. But if you are setting up in zone 2, your eligibility becomes 20%. So that way, you are eligible for either capex subsidy or rental subsidy. And this is one of the biggest buckets of incentive that is there. And the second biggest bucket is payroll subsidy. Here is where it gets interesting. If you look across India, many states have been providing either capex subsidy or payroll subsidy. Maharashtra is the first state to provide both. Okay. Just last week there was a announcement in Haryana. There also they are following this footstep. But let's see how many more states give this incentive. So what is payroll subsidy? For all employees earning more than 1 lakh, okay, 1 lakh monthly, 40% of the salary above 1 lakh will be given in the form of reimbursement for a period of 3 years. Okay. And this is capped to 50,000 per employee and maximum of 100 employees. Roughly, if you say there is a total annual capping of 5 crores. While this is the incentive, it will be, and if you are also qualifying for the diversity goal, if you are hiring more than 50% women and people with disabilities, then you are eligible for 60,000. Roughly, we did math for a small GCC hiring about 180 people in the next 2 years. They were just 180 people in the 2 years. We calculated they're eligible to claim incentives up to 14 to 15 crores. So depending on their capex, they are investing 15 crores of capex also. So they are getting that kind of incentive. So the amount is pretty huge. These are the two buckets. If any questions at this stage, please let me know.
So is it same for all types of GCCs and zones? This the payroll subsidy?
Yes. No. So payroll subsidy, if you are in zone 2, you are eligible to 50%. It's even more. Instead of 40, you will get 50% of the salary.
And what about those different GCC classifications? I mean,
everyone has same. Only BPOs are not allowed, like I said. So irrespective of where you fall in the GCC ladder, you are eligible for the same incentives. The payroll subsidy has a caveat. It will be disbursed in 3 years. You have to ensure that the employee is retained for 3 years. First year you get 30, second year you get 30, and then 40%. So how will I know in the first year if the employee is going to stay with me for 3 years? I think that is a common question I have heard from a lot of people. So it's not that way. By the 3rd year, you should have at least 100 employees who have stayed. So you will get the minimum of the employees who have stayed for 3 years. That is how it is. So that is a major chunk. Apart from that, there are many smaller incentives which are provided under the policy. Important of them, which are applicable to almost everyone, is you get a power tariff subsidy. So on your electricity bill, there is usually a tariff depending on where you are situated in the state. You get a straightaway discount of 1% for 5 years if you are in Zone 1, Pune and Mumbai, and 2 rupees for 5 years if you are in Nashik or anywhere outside of Pune and Mumbai. So that is a straightaway subsidy you get. This is capped to 20 lakhs per year. And second is electricity duty exemption. So on the same electricity bill, you have normally 10 to 15% is the electricity duty, depending on again the location. That also is given as a discount. So a substantial saving on that. Electricity duty exemption is for 10 years. So even if you're starting today, you have a long way to claim this benefit. So it's pretty exciting policy, and we have seen a lot of interest from the industry as well. In the last, this got announced in November. The policy is out. There are still guidelines yet to be announced. But even before the guidelines, we have seen at least 50 GCCs in Pune who have gone ahead and applied for this. So very substantial benefits. And if anyone of you are interested, this is the right time to apply. Apart from that, there is patent filing assistance, green certification, small incentives to encourage the right behavior that are also provided in the policy. The policy broadly talks of other non-fiscal benefits also, which is not company specific. This is overall to encourage GCC as an ecosystem. So GCCs under the labor laws will be now identified as critical sector, and you will be allowed to operate 24/7/365. Female employees can work in night shifts. You don't need a permission. You just need to intimate now. So this in any new MIDC that is being set up in the state, minimum 10% of the premises will be reserved for GCCs. So these things are also being done to promote the GCC as an ecosystem. So that's it on the policy front. But if you have plans for significant expansion or new setups in the state, the right step is to first prepare a detailed proposal, approach the government, explain our proposal, and based on the proposal, we get an offer letter. Once the offer letter is in place, then you can start your investments. Once investment is completed, then there is a final approval that is received from the state. And once you get the final approval, then the disbursement starts. Usually, this disbursement goes on for 4 to 5 years. So that's how you can start claiming the incentives. Thank you. Any questions? Anyone?
Yeah, I think I'll take it. It says, is the reimbursement taxable to a company? Nomenclature-wise, the reimbursement won't be taxed. But if it's a back-to-back arrangement that one entity receives 100 and pays somebody else 100, and what is to be seen is who is ultimately receiving the money. Because today, if you are making a service fee payment to someone which has a tax, and tomorrow if you just take one person and say that everything is reimbursement, that won't work. So the underlying has to be seen. And generally speaking, reimbursement won't be taxable.
Question?
Yes.
Any data you have once this policy is launched, how much more traction we are seeing in GCC coming?
So it's really early to tell right now. It's just announced in November 26. It's been hardly 6 months now.
Okay.
But as per our discussions with the authorities, there is significant interest from the industry. So you must have also seen the general trend is also the GC setups have increased in Pune.
Thank you.
Is that the reason why Mizuho also came to Pune?
I am not sure on that.
I think just one more bit is, if in case there is any plan to, because as I just said, it's a first come first serve, right? If somebody is planning to, and you kind of just think maybe we will not scale up to 100, maybe 80, 90, because it is first come first serve. There's a 2-year window. Making an application right now will help. While you may not have a detailed projection, an initial outlay will help, so that the authorities kind of register and say that okay, we will consider as and when you progress.
And right now, like I mentioned, the guidelines have not yet come out. So this policy is there, detailed rules have not come out. So if you have any concerns or any roadblocks, this is the right time to engage with the authorities also. They are open to all the suggestions from the industry.
only applicable for the companies post November 2025 or also like anything for the previous started companies?
So this policy specifically is only for companies who are setting up from November 25. But there is an exception. So the authorities are also considering to allow from April 25 onwards also. Because this is mid of the year November, so April 25 onwards also they are considering, but that is something you will have to request and get the approval from the government. And just to highlight, I think while GCCs is something which is a niche sector, Maharashtra also has an IT ITS policy. So even if you are selling software, you are providing services under the IT ITS category, you get some benefits. Payroll subsidy is not there, but you get stamp duty exemption, you get electricity duty, power tariff, all those things are still available. So that may be relevant for a much larger crowd. Yes.
Suppose my land comes into SEZ zone, so is GCC is possible approval
Yeah, definitely.
on SEZ land?
Yeah. So a lot of the GCCs are in fact in the SEZ land only, so they are considering that.
GCC is purely for exports, or is there any certain percentage that business should happen in India, or it should be purely export?
So the intention is to promote multinational companies and India outbound companies also. So a substantial part should be export, but there is no percentage. As long as you are providing services to parent organization and parent group, domestic also services are allowed.
But there is no defined percentage.
No, nothing matters. But it is like a reasonable percentage should be exports.
So I'd like to know a little more about local employment competition.
Yeah.
And maybe you can ask me. You have to hire from the Maharashtra companies, right? And I'm asking this because most of the GCC usually try to hire from employer in the states, in the states. I'd like to know the implication of this.
Actually, that's a very good point, and that's been one of the challenges for which industry has been meeting the authorities regularly. That is a request from the industry that this should be either waived or it should be brought down significantly. Maybe 10-20% should be locally employed. But that discussion is still going on. They are not yet decided. As of last week, when I met the authorities, they are not yet decided, but they are actively considering to revise this condition.
If we are mega or ultra, you mentioned that we can negotiate that part. Can this be negotiated?
Yeah, definitely. If you are a mega, ultra mega, you can negotiate.
I think maybe a little bit of perspective from their side, because since they are giving a rental subsidy, the idea is to have a physical space and people come and work down. Because if you have people from all across, there is work from home, which is very prevalent in the industry, right? So you may not have everyone coming down. So that was one of the perspectives, and they largely have borrowed this policy from the auto policy which existed. So any changes are welcome as long as the rules are not yet formed. They are still yet to form the rules. So they will take into account all applications filed so far and any requests that have come.
Any other questions?
So if we sign MOU with Maharashtra government in Davos, are there any additional benefits than this policy?
You get a better handed negotiation. But there is no classification for people who are signed over there. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really want to thank both of you. I mean, Nachiket, right? Like he was down with viral, and he was not sure in the morning whether he will be able to come. But thank you, Nachiket, for making it happen. Really appreciate. And again, right? Like we many times, right? Like we don't have exposure to these things. So now they are in the group. I'm going to add you in GGA group as well. So if you have any questions, right? Like we'll reach out to you. Okay, so thank you. And one more question. In PwC, in addition to having a very good IQ, is there requirement of a height as well? Okay, all right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anand sir, do you want to move on to a conversationalist panel? Let's move on to a conversational panel with Javier and Kensan so that we can learn more about their thoughts and form a Please welcome them to the stage. Do you want a small table for the kudos?